Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025 meeting of the Ashland Zoning Board of Appeals here at the Ashland Town Hall on the second floor in the Select Board Hearing Room. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast live by WACA-TV and live streamed on Facebook. Remote participation is available using the Zoom video conferencing platform for convenience only. Any disruption with the video conferencing platform will result in the platform being shut down. However, the meeting will continue. Meetings will continue to be broadcast on WACA-TV and live streamed on Facebook. On the posted agenda, there was a link to participate remotely from a computer and also a telephone number listed in order to dial in to the meeting. First order of business will be to call the meeting to order. I, John Trefethen, am present.
I, Brian Forrestall, am present.
I, Dan May, am present.
I, Stuart Siegel, am present on Zoom.
Can we moderate that sound a little bit? Thank you. It may take me a minute or two to recover from that. Also with us tonight are our Assistant Town Planner, Alvaro Esparza, and our Town Council, Lisa Mead. We had 3 items on the agenda this evening, and I'm going to move over to item number 4, which was listed as the continuance of a public hearing on 10-60 Main Street, the 40B comprehensive permit. We received a recent request by the applicant to reschedule tonight's hearing to May 13th, and we are going to take a vote on that in order to get that out of the way before we get to the other business at hand. Someone wish to make a motion to continue the hearing on 1060 Main Street to May 13th, 2025 at 7 p.m.?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second the motion.
I, John Trefethen, vote in favor.
I, Brian Forrestall, vote in favor.
I, Dan May, vote in favor.
Stu, were you going to vote?
Maybe you.
I vote in
You
favor.
said yes, okay. Thank you. Okay, so that is continued to May 13th at 7 p.m. Next item, going back to item number 2 on the agenda, is to review the hearing decision on the special permit application involving 128 Olive Street, which was the subject of a hearing that we held at our last meeting. At that meeting, we heard the evidence presented by the applicants, invited public comment, and then entered into discussion and discussed the case and directed Alvaro, our Assistant Town Planner, to draft a hearing decision granting the special permit. I think what is in order at this point, at this meeting, is a motion to reopen the public hearing and to close the hearing and enter into deliberations. You don't have to reopen it, you just close the public hearing. Okay. Then is there a motion to close the public hearing and enter into deliberation?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second the motion.
I, John Trefethen, vote in favor.
I, Brian Forrestall, vote in favor.
I, Dan May, vote in favor.
I, Stuart Siegel, vote in favor.
Thank you very much. Alvaro drafted a decision, distributed it via email to all of us last week. And Alvaro, were there any suggested changes that were submitted to you from the draft?
Yes. So right now on the screen you can see the drafted decision. So the changes suggested are marked on red. There was a couple of dates just referring to today's hearing that will be April 22nd. marked on the first line. Following on this page, there was just a grammatical change from rebuild to rebuild. The removal of the letter A, and then I added these 3 lines based on a comment just to follow up what happened after entering into discussion, what
Right.
the board discussed,
Okay.
and how that translated into me drafting the decision.
Excellent. Anyone have any questions or suggestions on the decision?
Nope.
Dan, okay.
Nope.
And Stu, how about you?
No, sir.
Okay. At the hearing last time, we had decided that the voting members on the hearing decision would be Brian Forrestall, Dan Murphy, and myself. So I, John Trefethan, vote in favor.
I, Brian Forrestall, vote in favor.
I, Dan May, vote in favor.
Excellent. Okay, the special permit has been granted. Alvaro, when would the decision be available for the 3 of us to come in and sign?
I can print the pages before the meeting is over so you guys can
Oh,
sign.
Great,
before hanging out.
excellent, that makes it easy. Okay, that being said, then we are done for the evening on that. And that brings us to our item number 3 on the agenda, which is continuance of the public hearing of 61 Waverly Street, a 40B comprehensive permit application. The hearing, was opened on March 25th of 2025, where we had a presentation, brief overall presentation by the applicant, and the matter was then continued until today's hearing to give our peer reviewers an opportunity to review the matter and render some advice to the board and to the applicant. And we had peer reviews back from our traffic engineer, Robert Michaud, who was here with us this evening, as well as our civil engineer. And we decided that for purposes of convenience and sort of targeting best uses of our time, we were going to talk about traffic this evening, and we will go into other areas at later dates. So with that being said, I see the applicant is here with his traffic engineer. I think we're going to start and ask Mr. Michaud to just review for everybody his findings and his recommendations, and we will then have some questions from the board. We'll have questions from the public. We'll obviously have the applicant an opportunity to respond, and we'll see where we end up. And that being said, Mr. Michaud, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Chair and board members. Again, for the record, Robert Michaud. I'm the managing principal of MDM Transportation Consultants. Our firm was retained to conduct a transportation peer review of the submitted materials for 61 Waverly Street, which included not only the traffic study itself, but elements of the submitted site plan. So I'll be commenting on those aspects of it. The opening statement is that what's been submitted in many regards complies with good industry standards and practices, but there are a number of areas that we've identified through peer review that require some clarification, expansion, modification, et cetera, so that everything's properly documented and accounted for, and the project impacts have been appropriately mitigated. What I'd like to do, and Alvaro, if you could just flip to the next sheet, is hit what I call the highlights of the review. The review itself is somewhere around 11 pages long, but really what the key points are boiled down to 5 topical areas that include the selection of the study area, what was actually studied as part of the impact assessment, and the underlying traffic volume conditions and assumptions that relate to that study area. Of particular interest was understanding and evaluating where additional traffic that would be generated by this use would be coming from and going to, and what those patterns would look like, and we're seeking some clarification on that. We, as would be the case in any similar project to this, have identified a series of transportation demand management actions, programs, elements that should be considered in the evolution of the project. And finally, we have a series of site plan related comments. And they really relate to access, parking, and circulation. Unlike site civil peer review, which is going to focus on drainage and other aspects of the site, our focus really is on those particular elements. So, Albert, if you could proceed to the next slide. We'll start with the study area. Generally, what's been studied includes the intersection of Union, Waverly, and East Union Street, which is at really the heart of where the site is, right? It's right where the high school is. The driveways to the high school are included as well. We know that the town has an initiative to update and improve the signal at Union and Fountain Street. Right? That intersection is very close to this area, and the plan for that particular location is to not only upgrade the equipment, but to coordinate its operation with the signal that was included in this report. So we're suggesting that the study area be expanded to include that location because it will become integral to how that intersection functions and how those signals speak to one another, how they're coordinated. That is a lead-in as well to the traffic volumes, which is the second significant comment that we have. The data that was used in the study dates back to January. January is a below-average month. Traffic studies rely on traffic conditions that would be at least representative of an average or typical condition. So the applicant in their study took a step to adjust that underlying January data to an average condition, and they've used a rather generic way to do that. It's not necessarily wrong, but we've looked at other permanent count stations in and around the area, which would indicate that January is anywhere from 8 to 12% below an average month. The applicant in their study has applied a 5% adjustment, so we're seeking clarification of that. Ideally, what that would mean is updating some of the count information to reflect spring 2025 conditions, which are much more representative of an average season. So we've suggested the option of either updating the underlying January data or at least conducting alternatively a spot count, meaning recount the intersection of Union, Waverly, and East Union, as well as, and at the same time, they do the data collection for the East Union and, the Union Street and Fountain Street intersection. In addition, and this is important, not only updating for seasonal factors, but considering other area projects that are currently in the pipeline or that have been recently approved. For instance, it would behoove the study to include the 10 to 60 Main Street project as a background project, as well as the Chestnut Street residential project, which was approved about a year or two ago. So there are some other area projects should be accounted for in the impact assessment that we've identified. Third principal comment really relates to how traffic will be dispersed from the site, to or from the site, right? Trip patterns associated with the site. The traffic study has a distribution that, in our experience, in my personal knowledge of this particular area of Ashland, is probably not wholly accurate. I believe that Waverly Street will provide a primary means of, primary route, if you will, to employment centers to the east. Only about 20% of the traffic in the current study is oriented in that direction. There's a significant proportion of the traffic that is in the traffic study that is assuming the use of East Union Street to the east, which I don't think is correct. So we're asking for a modification and update to those trip patterns to better reflect where people work and how they would likely get to those employment centers. In that regard, and this will eventually lead to some commentary on site access, we know that the site is currently being designed for curb cuts on both East Union as well as Waverly Street. And because Waverly Street, in our opinion, in my experience, it really serves as a primary route to these employment centers, we've requested that the applicant consider an option of allowing right turn egress onto Waverly Street so that it provides a more direct means of getting to those employment centers, reduces the pressures to East Union Street, particularly during the school arrival and departure periods, and that avoids or minimizes any impact that would otherwise occur to the signal at Waverly and Union Streets. The next slide, and actually this is an aerial, this next slide really represents what I've just described. Is shown in yellow, and the bottom center of the drawing is the approximate site location. In yellow is the Waverly Street corridor connection, which eventually would lead to either Route 9 or the Mass Turnpike, via various connecting roadways. But that, in our estimation, is likely to be one of the primary paths to get to from the site. The traffic study currently has an assignment of trips, 60% of which are assigned to what's shown as a red dashed line, which we don't think is quite right. So that's just meant to highlight that issue. The next slide speaks to elements of a project that relate to trying to minimize the amount of traffic that's generated, either through incentives for use of public transportation, transit pass subsidies, rideshare matching among folks who might be residents at this location, as well as what we call the unbundling of parking, right, charging separately for parking. Right. Many of these elements have been discussed and committed to by other similar projects, not only here in Ashland, but throughout the Commonwealth. There's been no discussion of what kind of program would be available to support this site. So we're simply providing a laundry list of typical TDM elements that are considered and that the applicant should be providing input to. Among those, I will point out, and I'll get to this in the site plan commentary, it's important that the site be designed to accommodate today's trend of transportation network companies, TNCs, that oftentimes visit these types of sites, Uber, Lyft, UPS, FedEx, Amazon, Grubhub, food delivery, et cetera. And so a component of the TDM program, although it's not intended to limit the amount of trip making by those users, is intended to really focus where those types of activities happen on the site so that they're properly accommodated and don't create on-site parking or circulation issues, et cetera. So I don't need to say much more than that on TDM. I think we'll let the applicant respond to that in due course. The fifth series of comments really relate to the site plan itself, again from the standpoint of access, circulation, and parking. What's shown here is a color rendition of the site plan that has been submitted as part of the application, and to orient the bottom of the site, this drawing indicates the East Union Street corridor. You can see the high school driveways directly opposite the site. One of the two curb cuts that are being proposed is actually just to the west of where the entry driveway is for the high school. And you'll see that between that proposed curb cut and the entry driveway to the high school, there's a proposed pedestrian crosswalk element as well. On the Waverly Street side, you'll see an additional curb cut, which is currently planned to be an enter-only one-way driveway from Waverly Street into the property. So those, from an access perspective and from a pedestrian circulation perspective, were focal points for us. And the next slide kind of recaps a couple of thoughts we had on the access, starting with the East Union Street access. We believe, because of the unique nature of that section of East Union Street relative to the high school, that it would behoove the applicant to consider primary driveway that's located as far east as possible, outside of the direct influence of those driveways. Those are high-volume driveways with student drivers, among others, that create a lot of potential conflict points that could otherwise be avoided if that driveway slid to the east. It would, and my understanding is that the proponents, engineers, have begun or have been looking at that potential relocation of driveway subject to meeting applicable sightlines, standards, and criteria. The second point is the Waverly Street driveway. Ideally, that should really be not only an entry point, but a point at which anyone living here can leave the site to get to Waverly Street directly without having to get onto East Union Street, go through the signal at Waverly and Union Streets, and then eventually get to that point. So it would be much more efficient. And in fact, I think the majority of trips commuting to workplaces would likely be oriented to Waverly Street in that direction. We'd like to see an evaluation of converting that driveway to allow that right turn egress for that reason. And finally, as it relates to the crosswalk that I pointed out previously on the plan, its orientation in the current plan between a proposed driveway and the entry driveway to the high school really introduces a lot of conflict with that location. And anyone who, to the extent that driveway does stay there for the site, anyone who's attempting to make a turn from that driveway, who's really focused on looking to the right to see if anyone's coming at them, will then proceed to make a turn, and they'll be practically on top of that crosswalk. So we think the location of the crosswalk should be a bit further east of where the entry drive is to the driveway, the high school driveway. Fairly straightforward change to reduce the potential for conflict and to enhance the visibility of those crossings if they do occur. The next slide speaks to site parking. There are approximately 391 parking spaces that are proposed. The vast majority of those are surface spaces. I believe about 39 of the spaces are in garage structures. And we took some time to look at ITE standards for maximum parking demand in the latest version of the ITE Parking Generation Manual. And what becomes apparent to us is that the amount of parking that's being proposed, which has an effective per unit ratio of 1.73, is a bit higher than what you would traditionally see for developments like this, especially lately. More recent studies by Metropolitan Area Planning Commission, MAPC, Perfect Fit Parking Initiative in particular, identify a downward trend in parking need, especially in this area of the state. And so we're suggesting that perhaps there's be a reduction in the amount of parking that's at least initially built to come more in line with what the ITE maximum standards would suggest is needed, which is about 60 fewer parking spaces that are currently being proposed. Those could be banked, if you will, and built at a later date to the extent they're demonstrated to actually be needed. But over parking a site really provides a disincentive to use of public transportation and other modes of transportation. So if you provide lots of parking, you're going to tend to force an issue where you're going to attract tenants that have higher per unit ownership rates for vehicles and that have a higher dependency on those types of travel modes. So land banking for parking is a suggestion. We also suggest, I mentioned earlier, specifically designating a portion of the spaces in the area in front of the principal entry points to the building as Transportation Network Company, TNC, short-term parking spaces for use by delivery vehicles, vehicles that may be picking up or dropping off folks, or Uber and Lyft, that type of activity. And finally, we would suggest some emphasis be placed on the move-in and move-out process for the site, where that would likely take place, and defining very specific zones within parking area or proximity to the building where move-in, move-out vehicles could be safely parked and staged so that tenants are not potentially blocking or impeding on-site circulation or unduly taking up too much parking space. Final commentary on the site plan is that we want to ensure that its circulation is coherent, that it has the ability to accommodate fire apparatus and service vehicles in a coherent way with ability to enter, exit, and circulate within the property without having to swing wide, so to speak, into opposing lanes or impact parking in service areas. So we're requesting a swept path analysis that would indicate for service vehicles, fire apparatus, and move-in and move-out vehicles what those paths look like so that we're reassured that there's adequate maneuverability. That is the primary commentary. There are other comments that are rather housekeeping items that don't really require a deep dive, but I'm glad to answer any specific questions on these that the board might have.
Thank you. Why don't we open it up for questions from board members? Brian, why don't we start with you? Any questions?
I don't have any questions at this point.
Okay. And Dan, how about you?
No questions at this moment.
Okay. Stu, questions at this point?
No questions. It's hard to formulate some questions until we know what the developer's reaction to these recommendations are.
Well, we're going to hear those shortly, I think, but I understand your comment. Mr. Michaud, I just have one question. The public safety, fire, and police building is down really at the confluence of Waverly and East Union Street. And if I understand your analysis correctly, the way the applicant has it structured now, if you want to go eastbound on Waverly, or even if you want to go west, you have to go on to East Union Street and go down to that intersection.
Correct. So the
That's a very difficult turn at that intersection to go east on Waverly coming from East Union Street.
correct, right.
So what effect could there be on the public safety building and the vehicles being able to get in and out? Even in an emergency, there's nowhere for cars to go on East Union if they're at that intersection.
Yes. So the good news is that that facility is nearby, but clearly we want to make sure that the signal equipment, which I believe is equipped with Opticom capability, is functional. Right? That the swept path and the movements from that station to the site, which I think are manageable, are not impeded in any way. Right? And that speaks to the Opticom issue. Once that responding vehicle was on East Union Street, what we're requesting is a swept path analysis to demonstrate how that vehicle would maneuver into the access or driveway for the facility, which has a relatively short driveway, right? One lane in, one lane out. We want to make sure that the curb radii, the width of those lanes is sufficient to be able to allow for that type of a vehicle to swing in. And once into the site, we want to make sure that they can easily traverse the entirety of each of the building edges. Right? So the circulation aisles that ring the site need to be tested to make sure that those are properly dimensioned and that parking layout is not going to impede the ability for those sweeps to occur. When leaving the site, clearly getting back to that station, which is nearby, would still rely on that use of the Waverly Union signal. I don't believe geometrically that that's a difficult movement necessarily, but I guess what I'd point out is to the extent mutual aid response is required, which would come from Framingham, that would speak to the need to get more directly to the site without having to go through the signal. So if you're coming from Framingham Way, the first opportunity to get into the site would be the Waverly driveway. It is currently designed in a way where it's an enter-only 24-foot wide driveway, so I don't see that that type of a layout would make it difficult for a fire apparatus to get in. But where we're asking that geometry to consider allowing right turn exit at least, we'd want to make sure that that driveway is appropriately designed. So in short, I don't see any particular constraint currently in the way that the site is laid out or how the access would need to work from the nearby fire station or necessarily in a mutual aid response, but that needs to be demonstrated with that
Thank you.
analysis.
By all means.
I think, Bob, one of the questions the chair had was actually related to the traffic, the residents only being able to use the East Union entrance and then having to go through the intersection where the public safety building is and then going east on Waverly.
Oh, I see.
I think that's really what he was saying.
Okay.
Not the whether or not the fire apparatus could get around the site, but by putting that whole volume to have to go around that corner, and then if there's an emergency and all that volume's coming around that corner, where do they go?
Right. So the short answer is this, that this is why we're suggesting that it would be appropriate to allow for more direct connection away from the street. I mean, you've got a driveway that's at a perpendicular alignment to Waverly, so it should be relatively easy to make those types of turns. I agree the alignment of East Union and where it comes in with that intersection at the signal is very difficult in terms of making that turn. It's something that you should avoid at all costs if you can, if it's feasible. In terms of the analysis, what the applicant has provided in their traffic study is an assessment of the signal, assuming roughly 40% of the volume from the site is going to go out that way. 60% in their estimation is going to go left out of the driveway. I don't think that's right. I used to live a mile from this site. I know it well. I don't think that pattern is quite what will happen. So there will be an added burden to that signal, which will have to be reevaluated, right, in the resubmitted material in the response to our commentary. I can't speak to whether or not that updated analysis would show, a longer queue or a longer delay. I suspect it would. It's more volume. But I guess the point is you'd want to use every means available to you to avoid having to rely on that right turn movement from East Union to Waverly. And I think there may be a way to do that.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Just real quick, Bob, you had mentioned consideration of current and proposed projects in Ashland. Should that include projects in Framingham as well, around the Waverly Street and Concord Street area? That seems to be somewhat congested over the past few years.
Very good point. We actually do raise that point. I'm a Framingham resident, and I'm familiar with many of the projects that are being proposed or have been recently approved along the Waverly corridor. And so we had suggested in our peer review that they take that into consideration as well. I know, for instance, this is a project our firm was involved with, actually, Fountain Street Residences, which is also relying on the same corridor. That's but one example. I know that there are at least two other projects in Framingham that would have some influence onto this corridor. So we're just looking at for a more comprehensive inclusionary assessment of those types of projects.
At this point, why don't we invite Mr. Lopez to come up and respond as he will, or whatever about the traffic issues that have been raised, and then when we're finished with that, we'll open it up for public comment, so you will have an opportunity to be heard.
Thank you.
You have to push the button.
That's better.
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Israel Lopez. And what I'd like to do is just turn the mic over to our traffic engineer and have him respond and maybe provide just a couple of comments on some of the comments that we've heard this evening.
That would be fine.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for the record again, Dan Clary with Langen. We have received Bob's review of the traffic study. We're going through it now. I have spoken to Bob about, just get some clarification on some things. One of the things that we are looking at is his suggestions on the driveways. We've done some preliminary work on the East Union Street location. We do have a site distance issue if we move it to where he's suggesting. There's a vertical crest curve there in front of the high school. The other suggestion of the right turn lane coming out is something we actually looked initially in planning the project to do a full access driveway on Waverly, and that would be our preference. However, we do have a site distance issue there looking back towards town, which involves relocation of the utilities and blasting of ledge to create the site distance necessary to allow vehicles to exit that driveway. We're going to take another look at it and get as creative as we can with that, but that suggestion might be cost prohibitive from the developer standpoint as far as getting into, digging into that side of the road. But suffice to say that we want to look, we'd like to have that right turn lane coming out there. We just got to find a way to make it work with the site distance. The other issues that he raised, again, we'll come back with a full response on each one of these issues. But we're going to recount the Waverly Union intersection and count the other intersections that are going to be coordinated, so that information will be updated, and the adjustments to the overall volumes, we'll review that based on the results of those counts and make the appropriate adjustments. I've spoken to Bob about the distribution, and we're going to revisit that. And I've known Bob for a long time, and I take his word for him understanding it because I remember when he lived there. So, and the last but not least, I just want to touch on the TDM. We're going to look at that, but as I reminded Bob, in these cases, the Gutierrez company will likely not be the end user. They'll work with whoever the user it will be to customize a TDM program that works for everybody. A lot of the suggestions Bob made are pretty standard things that are incorporated into most projects, but we reserve kind of, we want to reserve the ability to work with the end user on, customizing it towards something that they'll support and what the town will accept as well. So with that, I can answer any questions you might have.
Okay, opening to the board. Questions for the gentleman?
I don't have any at this time.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Stu?
Not at this time.
Okay. Excuse me. Apparently I know Mr. Michaud's report came in just a week or so ago, so you've had limited time to work on a formal response, and it sounds like there are a number of responses in the works, but not ready to be published for us to consider yet. Looking ahead, our next meeting would be on May 13th, and I'm just wondering whether that would give you enough time to get things moving so we can continue the process with traffic and perhaps also start civil engineering perhaps in the same evening, but definitely keep the ball rolling on the traffic issue. So that's probably better addressed to Mr. Lopez perhaps than to you, sir. But
Well, actually, I could tell you that we're well into the responses.
Okay.
And we should have something back to the town next week.
okay, then
So
that should.
plenty of time to look at things and hopefully get to a point where we're narrow things down for the
Okay.
next meeting.
And I think that works, because I very much would like to keep this moving moving forward so we don't get bogged down and start to run towards a time deadline problem. We're not anywhere near that yet, but we also have a lot of things to cover, so, okay, that would be good. Sure.
Just in response to, you mentioned civil engineering and stormwater, and we also have received the comments from the peer reviewer and are working on those responses as well. And, I suspect we will be able to have a formal response back to the town well before the next meeting, so we can tackle
That would be
stormwater as well.
Good, that would be very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that being said, if there are no other questions from the board, why don't we open it to public comment? If anybody wishes to speak about the traffic issues that we've been talking about tonight, please line up. And if you're participating via Zoom, raise your artificial hand up there, and Alvaro will let you in, and we'll try and do an alternate, one in person, one on Zoom, one on person, to give everybody a fair shot. You know the drill, Mr. DeSoni, so identify yourself and...
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Mark Sony, 119 Main Street. Through that report, I'll say with the chairman, unless I have to go straight to Mr. Michaud there. You have the East Union exit going down towards the end of the hill to 135 Waverly Street itself. Why wasn't it the other way? People work in Holliston had to take Cedar Street. Why wasn't that counted?
Well, I'm not sure that's a question you can answer, Mr. Michaud, but if you could.
I'm not quite sure what the question is. Are you talking about why the driveway is located where it is?
No, I'm talking when the people leave
Yes.
from the site. They said always going down to the right.
Mm-hmm.
They take a left turn because they had to work in Holliston and take Cedar Street. That's traffic too. That goes on the same road. And I was just wondering, why was only the going down towards 135 Waverly Street only area that was a turn and not the left turn?
I see. The study of the area that was selected includes those intersections that would sustain what we call a measurable impact, right? And the way that that's defined is based on the percentage of traffic that would be using an intersection and how that percentage changes the existing conditions. So any location that would sustain more than a 5% change in volume, it would typically be required to be studied. Right? Or alternatively, locations that sustain an impact of 100 or more additional vehicles per hour. Right? Those are criteria that are established by Mass DOT and its standards. Locations like Cedar Street, for instance, will have some amount of additional traffic on them, but would not likely meet those criteria of 5% change or 100 vehicles per hour increase. So what's been included in the study, which is the major signalized intersection at Union and Waverly Street, and the additional location that we're requesting to be studied, those do meet those criteria. That's the long answer to your question. You know, what they've studied is appropriate, and it's based on what guidance is provided by Mass DOT in conducting these types of reports.
And the last little bit, it is still the same, I understand it. When they have families who moved into the apartments, into what they have for sites, if they have high school kids and they have license and they go back to the high school, isn't that back and forth continuous traffic in that small area?
What is your question, Mark?
And you're saying traffic flow. what goes
You're
down.
asking if there are high school-age children living in the apartments and they have a car and they drive from that parking lot across the street to the high school parking lot?
Yeah, back and forth from the high school itself. Then have to go down towards the end of East Union Street, take around the corner, back up to Waverly Street, and then go back out of East Union, and then back left to the high school.
Well, as it's set up, Mark, the design is that cars would exit onto East Union Street from the parking lot and go across the street to the high school, I think.
Yeah, but if, once they exit, they hit,
Once they exit, they can go back into the apartments parking lot through the East Union Street.
well, that's one way, would that be one way?
No, it's both ways.
Oh, it's two ways.
Yep, it's two ways.
Oh, then what, okay, I won't ask why Waverly Street is one way, okay.
So we need to move on to the next question, person that has questions. I know they may not be behind you, but is there anybody online? Oops, people are coming, Mark, so we're going to have to ask you to wrap
Yep,
up.
I'm done.
Thank you, sir. Anybody online?
Nobody online at this
Okay.
moment.
We're ready for you, sir.
Hi, Art Johnson, 4 Roberts Road, right on the corner down the street. I grew up there. I live there now, been there 70-something years, so I know the traffic. In the morning, there's trailer trucks now. They built an office park across the street. They were supposed to have fire lane all around the building. I don't know how that got built, but there's not a fire lane all around the building. It's a steep drop off into the woods. So in the morning, tractor trailers stop traffic. Guys get out and they're directing tractor trailers into that little office park there. I don't know what business is going on there, but big traffic, so traffic backs up from that. You get the school buses too. On weekends, when I'm out there in the backyard, cars come speeding up from Route 135 from Framingham. I can hear them coming, and it's like an S curve. So it's a fun drive, but it's a dangerous drive. So now we're going to have an entrance into this apartment complex on a kind of an S curve. It's kind of a dangerous setup. This intersection, we're calling it, is really a hairpin turn. So I think it's like a 330, you come down and then you got to go up that way to make the turn. So when I go there, I always think I'm going to hit the car. I mean, it's just kind of I don't know if they're going to widen the road in that area to make the turn easier, but it's a tough traffic situation right there. So I just wanted to put those comments out there.
Thank you.
Hi, Paul Flaherty, the owner of 63 Waverly Street, abutting the property. What Artie was just saying, one of my questions is that intersection at East Union Street going to have some improvements made? Turning there is not good at all. Turning from East Union Street east on, east on Waverly Street is not good. Is that going to be part of the plan to somehow improve that intersection?
I am not aware of any plans that the town has for that. I know Mr. Mishaw had identified that the town was going to upgrade the Fountain Street intersection with new traffic lights, but I don't think there are any plans that I've been made aware of that the town or the state, and 135 is a state road, so I assume they would have jurisdiction over that.
But East Union is a
But East
town
Union
road,
is a
right?
town, and I'm not aware of any plans for that.
It just seems like that intersection should probably be improved if possible. Also, where our property is east on Waverly Street to the proposed entrance, making that also an exit. The sight line, we have a driveway 50 feet away, and it's bad. The sight line looking to the west, or I'm not sure if that's south, I guess it's actually south, but that, I don't think that having a right turn lane leaving there is a good idea. If you have an entrance only, emergency vehicles from the fire station, police station, rather than go up East Union Street, can continue straight through the light on Waverly and go up a nice, big, wide entryway, and it's a perfect entrance for emergency vehicles to get into the site. I mean, that's just, to me, that having that right turn lane there is going to make things a little worse on Waverly Street. I understand they're trying to help out the traffic at the intersection of East Union, but, you know, unless that intersection can be improved somehow, which seems as though that's, whether it's the town's responsibility or the state, that I don't know, but seems like that should be looked into.
Chair, could I just chime in real quick? Would it be fair to say that as these projects kind of materialize and progress, those types of considerations would be taken in by other committees like the planning board to, you know, improve, but at this time, you know, it's a bit early?
You know, I don't know. Obviously, the select board is the ultimate, you know, arbiter of what is done and the projects that are done and can be financed by the town. So I'm not aware that there's anything in the pipeline at this point. Someone is standing behind the speaker that
Okay.
I don't want to put her on a spot because she's here speaking as a private citizen. But I have not heard anything, which does not mean that there isn't anything, or it does not mean that if various projects that are being sought to be built are ultimately approved and built, that projects won't be undertaken to improve the situation. It's an unknown. You know, our meetings are broadcast by WACA-TV. The documents are on the what town's website for the zoning board. So, you know, the town fathers have an opportunity to see what's going on and what potential there can be. But the town also has limited resources to respond to any number of things. And certainly what we've seen in Ashland in recent years is a large influx of applications for housing to be built and apartments. And so it's a long-winded response to your question when the answer should have been just one word or three words. I don't know.
Mr. Chair, if I could, I think Mr. Michaud can answer part of this question. So if the applicant's project changes the level of service at that intersection, the applicant may have some obligations, or if the applicant's project creates a safety condition that imperils public safety, the applicant would have an obligation to correct that situation. But I'll let Mr. Michaud address that further.
Sure. First of all, that section of 135, although it's a state-numbered route, is under local jurisdiction.
Okay, good.
My understanding. So any improvements that would be made there would be subject to local review and approval. That said, I believe when the town improved that intersection, signalized it, it was not signalized for many, many, many years, that they provided geometry that was feasible within the right-of-way that exists in that area. So that right turn movement in particular, which is nearly 180 degrees, it's probably about a 160-degree turn, is constrained by where the private property lines are. Right? So that's the short answer. So unless there's an easement or a taking of that property, improving that approach to Waverly Street will not be feasible. Right? So it depends on securing land that is privately owned.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And the state has already been involved in this, right? The state already improved this project. So if there's state money that needs to be used to improve the intersection, they're the ones that want this. Maybe they should step up and,
Different agencies, different process. What the state approved was it gave the applicant the right to file a 40B application to come before the ZBA to determine.
and the state doesn't care about the consequences of those.
I'm not going to say that.
Well, okay, I said it. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
We have-
Anybody online that
Yes,
wishes to
we
comment?
have one person online. Derek Giuliani, I'm asking you to unmute. Please say your name and address for the record. Derek, you are now on mute.
No one there? Then let's move on to someone that we know is here, because we can see her.
Claudia Bennett, 9 Sandstone Way. I am a member of the Select Board, but I am speaking as a citizen this evening. Just to clarify, Route 135 is town-owned. I think the town took possession of it many years ago. In terms of that intersection, I was on the school committee when we built the high school there. It was cost prohibitive and for a number of reasons to try to alter the intersection. Now we've gone and built a public safety building, and the town did the best it could do under the circumstances with that. But again, there's no easy fix to that intersection, otherwise it would have been done in one of those two instances. I did just wonder if, with these traffic studies, do we ever do any video or photographing of what things actually look like at different times of day? Of maybe what Mr. Johnson articulated in terms of the tractor trailers coming in and out. Is there that sort of, I think that sometimes is a much more powerful understanding of what's going on than just a bunch of numbers.
Through the chair,
Yes.
I know, our firm actually did some video reconnaissance for East Union Street. We have equipment, it's made by a company called MyoVision that allows you to record for as long as you'd like, right? So we did that recording so that we had a better understanding of the ebb and flow of traffic that's related to the high school in particular. But, and I believe that the applicant, proponent, and they can clarify, may have used similar equipment and data collection techniques for the intersection at the signal, right? But that data, if it does exist, and I see a head nod, is typically limited to the peak hours, right? So 7 to 9, 4 to 6. And what it's not likely to have in it is extended recording that would pick up things like the tractor trailers, which periodically may need to hold up traffic to be able to maneuver properly. So I don't believe that video that you're suggesting exists. It's certainly not something we've collected, and it may not be in what the proponent has already collected to date.
I think it might be a good thing to make it exist. I think that it's important to see what that intersection looks like, to see what it looks like when, buses and are turning in the intersection and larger vehicles as it stands now, during even peak hours or outside of peak hours, but certainly a lot of that happens during peak hours. And also, I just wondered too what the rationale would be to reduce the number of parking spaces. And the consultant says that data is showing now that fewer cars or fewer parking spaces are needed because there's fewer cars. I have to say that in downtown Ashland, recently we built a structure with apartments, and we have consistently cars that need to park out on Main Street because there's not enough parking for the people that live in the building. So it doesn't feel like that's the story here in Ashland. And then those units are only a half a mile from the train station, and they still, have to park vehicles out on the street. This over here is going to be even further. So I just can't even imagine We're not talking about downtown Framingham where you could maybe walk to get some groceries, you could walk to a train station, you can get around town in most stores. That's not the case in Ashland still. You still need basically a car for many things, even if you use the train to commute. So I would just suggest that reducing the number of parking spaces would not be wise. Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, Bob, did you mention that there's a Mass DOT count station nearby that's relevant?
There are a number of count stations. They're not directly on 135 or any of the more local streets. They do have permanent count stations on Mass Pike, for instance, Route 9, et cetera. And they provide at least an indicator of what the seasonal trends are like.
Okay, there wasn't one on 135 though?
No.
Okay.
Alvaro, anybody come back online?
No, not at this moment, and just a reminder to anybody online, if you want to participate, just raise your hand and then I'll ask you to unmute.
Okay. Why don't we close public comment for the time being? Mr. Lopez, would you mind coming back up to the stand? Attorney Mead would like to ask you a question about your site plan.
Mr. Lopez, I haven't read the civil review yet, our civil peer review, but as I'm flipping through this, because I was trying to see if your property was abutting the intersection, I'm noticing on all the site plans that you included in your application, none of them are of the entire property. And I would like you to provide to the board a site plan that includes the entire property, please.
Certainly, yes.
Thank you.
Will do.
Okay. Well then, why don't we entertain a motion to continue this matter to our May 13th meeting at 7 p.m.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second the motion?
I, John Trefethan, vote in favor.
I, Brian Forrestall, vote in favor.
I, Daniel May, vote in favor.
Stu?
I, Stuart Siegel, vote in favor.
Okay, excellent. Then this hearing is continued to May 13th at 7 p.m., and we will continue the discussion on traffic and hopefully be in a position to start discussion on the civil engineering aspect of the matter. The board does have a few remaining things to do. Why don't we take a 5-minute recess to give the people that don't wish to hear us approve minutes from a previous meeting and talk about staff updates, give you an opportunity to leave without interference. if you want to give me a countdown or. Good evening, welcome back to our April 22nd, 2025 meeting. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes for our March 25th, 2025 meeting. It was a rather lengthy meeting. We got the draft sent out. Were there any proposed changes in the draft that was sent out, Alvaro?
No.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or concerns or proposed changes for the minutes?
No questions.
Okay, my compliments to whoever prepared them. They were about 7 pages long, very detailed, and so very helpful, I found them. So let's take a vote. I, John Trefethen, vote in favor.
I, Brian Forrestall, vote in favor.
I, Daniel May, vote in favor.
I, Stuart Siegel, vote in favor.
Okay, thank you all. That takes care of that. Staff updates and administrative matters.
So we will have a Zoom remote meeting on May 6th. That will be the extra meeting that we added on our previous meetings. It will be regarding a variance and a special permit. Later this week, I'll be sending up the materials and everything. All the notifications have been sent to the abutters. So we're in a good spot for that. Yes.
And is it expected that the applicants will be appearing via Zoom as well?
Yes, I
Okay.
will be following up, sending an email to both of them. I already talked with one of them that came to check in, and then the other one will be notice about all this process.
Very
Is
good.
this meeting Zoom?
Yes. Yeah.
So that would be good. That's the extra meeting that we decided we would hold in order to
Yeah.
get.
So I guess just to update, May 6th will be the Zoom meeting. May 13th will be the next meeting
Right,
that we're here
so
for.
May will be
continued
a
hearings.
3-meeting month, so
Yes.
here we go. Okay. Nothing else under staff updates and administrative matters to talk about at the moment?
Not at this moment.
Okay, great. Then I think it's, anybody have anything to discuss without violating the open meeting law? And if not, let's take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I second the motion.
Okay. I, John Trefethen, vote in favor.
I, Brian Forrestall, vote in favor.
I, Daniel May, vote in favor.
I, Stuart Siegel, also vote in favor.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Stu.
Okay, WACA, thank you very much. We can close the meeting.